waters by. He doth return my soul for his name's sake. In paths of justice leads me quiet life.
This quiet little village lies about 10 miles south of Doncaster, its name Scrooby. And from the board outside the local inn, it's obvious it has some connection with the Pilgrim Fathers, one of whose principal members resided here. In the centre of the village stands the Church of St. Wilfrid, where early in the 16th century the congregation leaned towards separatism. The separatists broke away from the established church because of fundamental principles they could not support. William Brewster Sr. was bailiff to the Archbishop's estates and master of the Queen's posts, occupying the manor house here in Scrooby. He was involved with the separatists, and when he died, his son William Brewster Jr., also a separatist, succeeded to both his jobs and to the manor house, where he arranged for the separatists to meet in secret, as by then they were being persecuted. To these meetings came William Bradford, who was to become a leading figure of the Pilgrim Fathers. After further persecution, he and the other separatists fled to Holland. He was born in the manor house here in the village of Austerfield, a few miles north of Scrooby, and baptized in the Church of St. Helena. Eventually they decided to make a new home for themselves in America, so with royal approval, acquired with difficulty, 35 separatists with 67 other pilgrims set sail from Plymouth in 1620 on the Mayflower, bound for the Virginian colony to join the first contingent from Britain. Conditions on board were cramped and the journey was arduous, taking 2 long months, during which time the weather worsened, forcing the passengers to stay below. Many became ill, many died, and none of them reached Virginia, as gale-force winds diverted them, and they landed here on Cape Cod, where they stayed for 5 weeks before setting sail once more, only to be diverted again by gale-force winds, this time landing in a bay which had already been charted 6 years previously. They decided to accept their fate and establish their colony, which they called New Plymouth. This rock, called Plymouth Rock, is purported to be the very one the Pilgrims stepped onto as they left the ship. During their first harsh winter in an area shared with the Wampanoag Indians, half the members of the colony died. But spring brought hope when the Wampanoag leader, Massasoit, befriended them, teaching them how to sow their grain, how to hunt and to fish. A statue was erected to the memory of Massasoit on Coal Hill, where the Pilgrims secretly buried their dead that first winter. The original site was chosen because of the proximity of Town Brook, providing fresh water. Garden plots were allotted to the early settlers, who built their houses and settled down to make a new life for themselves.
Indian car.
In 1621, William Bradford became governor of the colony, and William Brewster became the spiritual leader, though he was never ordained.
The age of miracles is over, Master. There are no more prophets.
Right. They keep flying away anyway, canny they are, they can tell you.
Finished.
They're coming out of it, he's got a bit better skill for that sort of work.
Turkey birds don't fly.
Oh, I see.
But they flap their wings about and they run away.
Worked for my father. Father kept a printing press in Leiden for a short time. And Master Winslow, he'd been apprenticed to a printer in London before he left there and come to Holland and joined our congregation. And he lived with us and worked for Father for a time. Before Father had to close the press, break it apart. He was nearly arrested for the books he were printing. Were chiefly books that could not legally be printed in England, but he did print them that they might be sold in England.
Are not truly in London.
That's true.
Though it looks much like the rest of the city. But on the north bank is Ireland of the Lord Mayor.
As they were on the coast, it was necessary to build a fort for their protection. And so these were their beginnings. And later, because the Indian population was far less than that of the Pilgrims, the Indians' method of grinding corn was inadequate. So in 1636, a grist mill was built. Plymouth's oldest surviving historical house was built in 1640, 20 years after the Mayflower landed. The original site, now a heritage garden, features a statue dedicated to the intrepid English women whose courage, fortitude and devotion brought a new nation into being. On the waterfront, commissioned as part of the Plymouth 1920 tercentenary celebration, is a statue of William Bradford. Their tercentenary was also acknowledged by the Anglo-American Society when a plaque was placed outside the manor house in Scrooby. This new Plymouth is a vast cry from the Plymouth of 1620, but their historical past is still very much in evidence. At the top of this rise stands the National Monument to the Forefathers. Built in 1889, it is the largest granite monument in America, dedicated to the Pilgrims, some, including the leaders, who came not 35 miles from our very own doorstep.